Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. We know that one of the main themes we've been talking about a lot over the last several weeks is the position and strength of the Pacific jet stream. And I'm going to talk to you about it again today, and we're going to put it in the context of a couple of things: the drought expansion and how windy things have been across much of the country. First of all, just a reminder, when we see these red colors, this tells me that the zonal, meaning west to east flow in the upper levels of the atmosphere, around 40 to 60 degrees north, is very strong. Where we see the blue greens, that would represent where the winds are weaker, even out of the east. And so what you've got right in the middle and through here is a strong area of high subtropical pressure. So the flow goes like this on one side and this on the other. And it is very characteristic of La Niña, especially as it's been strengthening as of late. Now, what it's given us, and we've talked about this quite a bit, is that this northern branch of the jet stream has been really coming across the Pacific like something like this. And what you're looking at here is wind speeds since the equinox compared to average. We've had a couple of very strong pieces of the jet stream that have been screaming across the North Pacific Ocean. Now, we discussed last week how this coming over the mountains has really expanded the rain shadow here in the western plains, causing the drought situation to get worse and worse there, while delivering a lot of precipitation, especially to like coastal Oregon and Washington, and now, as of late, in big storm systems that have hammered the northern plains. So we just take a look at April so far, and this is what you get. This is our map that shows total precipitation ranks by climate district, and now you can see the effect. The flow comes in, the waves eject north. Right now, North Dakota is having its wettest April on record. We've been very wet, well, really snowy in eastern Montana, but the dry slot of each of these systems continues to push the drought deeper and deeper from parts of the high plains to the central plains. Now, we brought in some big storms into here on Friday, and also a massive dust storm that followed it, and a lot of big hail out of some of the storms, but this dry area in through here just continues to be a major problem. And elsewhere, throughout the rest of, just looking at the Corn Belt as an example and into the Northeast, we've been chased out of the fields on this side by either cold weather or frequent precipitation. So we're just kind of comparing and contrasting the country here. Now, just to bring you up to speed on a couple of things, this dry area goes all the way back through winter. And this is the latest data I've got through April 25th, looking at the accumulated snowfall departure. So we're looking at normal and then taking the difference. And what we see here is through parts of South Dakota, Nebraska, western Iowa, and parts of Minnesota, we're all the way at like 20 to 30 inch deficit in snowfall. Now, lately, this whole area has made a massive jump in snowfall, and you've seen some of the big systems that have gone through there. But flooding on the Red River Valley of the north and also on the headwaters of the Mississippi, this is going to be a problem given this snow melt. All right. Out in the west, we've lately brought in a lot more snow and rain here. We've picked up some extra snow in the northern Sierra and the Klamath Mountains, but overall, there's a large deficit throughout the Sierra Nevada. We've talked about that extensively throughout the spring. So I went in just a couple of places, and what I was interested in seeing was, let's go from like central, Nebraska all the way down to the panhandle of Texas. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at North Platte, Nebraska first. Now, what's important to see here is this is an annual precipitation accumulation figure. And I put on here several other years. 2021 is shaded, as you can see here in blue. So we finished the year wetter than average. But right around the end of October, it actually just stopped precipitating in this particular area. And before that, not much. Since then, the start of 2022, we're looking at 34% of normal precipitation. And a lot of that came on one event that happened here back at the beginning of March that brought in a grand total of like a ½ inch of precipitation. So this is how dry things are in this particular area. And as you saw from the statistics, there are places in Nebraska that are having a top 4 driest driest April on record. And yes, Dust Bowl years are included in these data. Now, from there, I want to take you down to Lubbock. And if you go to Lubbock, the precipitation basically stopped at the beginning of October last year. So we just flatlined. And since then, we've had one event almost right on New Year's, and almost nothing since. So we're looking at 16% of normal precipitation down here in the plains. And this is just continuing to be a major, major problem. So I'd like to talk about it a bit. Now, there's a quantity we measure and observe called specific humidity. It's different from relative humidity. Relative humidity is relative to temperature. Specific humidity is absolute. It's how many kilograms of water vapor there are in a kilogram of dry air. And so far, from the equinox until a couple days ago, when this data set was updated, you can see that we have a significant deficit here. In other words, the moisture coming from the Gulf is not able to make it much past about this point at times. And this would be the moisture we'd supply with the big storms that would come into this particular area. Now, just for the sake of comparison, can I show you last year? Last year we were drier, but the dryness was much further into the interior of the mountains. And as a result, we'd broken down the big drought that had been in this area. So look at it again. This was a year ago versus this year. Those are some of the big differences. I've also been studying the wind, and I'm coming up with a great way to display how strong the winds have been here. But let's go take a look at North Platte just as an example. Now, this is from January 1st of this year until the 24th, and this is a windrows. So when we look at these spikes, they tell us the direction the wind has been coming from. Well, we can get an average down here. So the average wind speed of all the observations taken by the ASOS stations, this includes the overnight calm time periods and the really fast winds that we get in the day, it's 10.9 miles an hour, or basically 11. You can see that most of those winds at the surface have been coming out of the north to west or northwest quadrant. All right, now that's important to see because what did I show you at the beginning? Where's our jet stream been coming in this area? So we're seeing the surface winds doing the same thing in this particular region. Now watch this. If I were to show you a year ago, look at the difference. Ready? Did you see that? This was this year, last year. Much more of an easterly component or a southeasterly component. This is where we bring in the moisture. And look, the winds were 2 miles an hour slower. Now you're going 2 miles an hour. What is that? When you're averaging from January 1st to the 24th, this is a huge difference in the winds. So just how to understand something. A total wind difference on average of 2, 3, 4 miles an hour is the difference between a year where things are relatively calm and a year like we're having, which is with some extreme wind. And the net effect of all of this, the fact that we've not drawn in this moisture like we did a year ago, is what makes the newest drought monitor, which came out last Thursday, look something like this. We've just not been able to beat back the drought in this particular area. Now, just for comparison, remember I showed you the moisture for this year? I always get asked, well, what about those big bad years, 2011, 2012 and such? Well, I'll show you 2011. In 2011, remember, we had extensive drought in the high plains of Texas, Oklahoma, western Kansas, back into New Mexico. But don't forget, 2011 was one of the most active Aprils on record. In fact, I think it is the most active April on record for severe weather. So we had opened up lots of Gulf moisture here to really produce a lot of storms. And by the way, this is what 2012 looked like from March 20th of 2012 through April 22nd. Remember, the beginning of 2012 saw lots of storms in this area, and many of us in the Corn Belt found holes in between that to plant a crop. The drought of 2012 happened later. It was a problem in June, July, and August. Remember that. So that was a flash drought scenario that really got established here. So I thought you might like just to see that comparison. Now take a look at the temperature side of this. Parts of the Pacific Northwest are having their coldest April on record. The Northern Plains very cold. Much of the Corn Belt very cold. And about the only places that have been warm have been down here in the southern tier of the U.S. and the Southwest. And I went back and I just made a map. And this map may not seem fully intuitive just yet, but what I did was went back to the beginning of April up until the 24th. So basically this is about 500 total hours of time. And I just made a map showing you how much of that time was spent below freezing. Now you just saw how cold the Northwest has been. I'd like to zoom in on it. There's been some problems here with late freeze events hitting the cherries, the pears, the apples, and the vineyards throughout like the Willamette Valley, parts of Washington, and into Idaho. And this has been a very big problem with some, freezes that are happening after bud break. And the result of that is meaning that we're hitting some of those big industries like the wine industry here in the Pacific Northwest with this brutally cold air. I mean, just look at these ranks. So when I say all of this, we need to be asking, is there a break coming? Are we going to shift to a warmer pattern? Are we going to open up windows? We know that that's one of the big things we need to be focusing on. And what's going to be happening with that drought? So those are the questions we're going to attempt to answer now that we've kind of built some history into our understanding today. Well, it's been pretty clear that a large front has passed through. And just looking here, I'm recording this at about 7 o'clock in the evening on Monday, Central Time. And that front has passed through and temperatures are anywhere between 10 to up to 30 degrees colder than normal behind it. And we want to see how long that colder air is going to be lasting, because as I just take you through the middle of this week out to Wednesday, it's going to push that 50-degree isotherm and the 4-inch soil temperatures in the morning down pretty far to the south. And we know we need to get those numbers up pretty high to get a crop going here across, for example, the I-states or into Kentucky. We just need to bring the soil temperatures up. So we need to ask if that's going to be coming up anytime soon. So to continue the comparison and ask that question on the longer term, let's take a look at ocean temperatures. What I did here was in my morning report, I included the April 23rd, 2021 graph, so that was last year at this time, to this year. And I know you know these big differences because we've been discussing them. La Nina is much stronger this year compared to what it was doing last year, which was fading hard. We still have, like we did a year ago, cold water in the Gulf of Alaska and off the Baja. But from April 23rd to June 1st last year, all of this warm water overtook this whole area. And that was one of the reasons why, instead of the major drought risk being in the midsection of the country, it moved west, which means we're watching the same thing again this year. That's one of our only preseason indicators on what could be happening. As forecast pretty well, the MJO refuses to come out of null space or out of the Indian Ocean or out of this what we call the maritime continent, which is just north of Australia. In other words, each time we get this kind of fake out where it says, oh, it's going to swing way out here, but it's hard to do that when this when this La Nina persists the way it is. And just as I've been showing you as of late, the Southern Oscillation Index, again, a comparison of the pressure in Tahiti versus Darwin, it's still way up here nearing a value of 18. Anything above 7 is considered base state La Nina. We see it really clearly in the trade winds, right? Over this area, see how the blues above this area? They're coming out of the east and they're relatively strong. That is a telltale sign of a La Nina, and likely the MJO is going to be somewhere phases 4 and 5, resisting getting out to phase 7 and 8. Now, why talk about it? If it can break out here, if it does that, that means La Nina has backed off. That means a major pattern shift for the Pacific. We're watching to see if that happens. But while this persists, all of the long-range forecasts are going to look something like this. You see, when you correlate, and I did this last week, April and May precipitation to the Southern Oscillation Index, which is positive. The red colors are where it's wetter than average, and the blue colors is where the correlation would be drier. And what we get is this area tends to be drier. We tend to see systems rolling through the northern plains and throughout much of the eastern half of North America. So we have really tight planting windows here and here, and a lot of snow and late season cold that typically comes in here with these big systems. But the dry slot tends to be quite large, and that's the same narrative we've been carrying going forward. So as I look out there all the way to the 5th of May, what do we see again? Strong zonal jet targeting the northwest. No major ridges are forecast here. And why do we look for that? If all of a sudden I saw the jet stream build up into a large ridge there, right now it's cutting under and going through. But if it did, that would be wide open planting windows for the midsection of the United States, really the eastern Corn Belt as well. Instead, the flow comes in, dips, meets up with the subtropical jet, and this is what we end up getting out of it. For the rest of this month, from now until May 30th, we tend to see this whole area showing up wetter than average. The dry side of each system continues to cause problems in the plains, and naturally, we go over drier this time of year in much of California into the Four Corners. That's normal for this time of year. But as we play it forward, let's just look at a time period of, let's just stop it here. This would be May 9th to June 9th. Again, we see this area favoring above average precip here and throughout the Canadian prairie. The models will not break down this drought area until we get a shift in the 5 things I just shared with you, which include the current drought position, include the position of the jet stream, what's going on with La Nina. It also includes the expanding rain shadow and the fact that we cannot get troughs to dip here. That's it. That's the main story with what we're talking about right now. Now, over the last 72 hours, of course, we had yet another massive snowstorm that went through here. We have flooding on the Red River of the North. Huge severe weather outbreak in the plains. Problem was, following that severe weather was a big dust storm, and it wiped out so much of the moisture that came through. We've been flooding here, and we're watching this slow-moving front try to creep its way to the east. When we look at the snowfall, this was through last night, there were places up here that just added another 6 to 18 inches of snow into this area. And there's a lot of water that will be melted and put into the ground. This is certainly affecting spring wheat in a big way, though, right now. Okay, going forward, this was an animation of the radar this afternoon. So this is our slow-moving front. It's pushed a big line of storms that's now cleared the Gulf Coast. And if we just go out there and have a look at where we got some lightning late this afternoon, you can see some of our active lightning strikes on one of my favorite sites, blitzertongue.org. Now, where did we all pick up with the forecast is going to be with the high-res NAM. So that front attempts to clear east through the day on Tuesday. And what I'm going to be watching Tuesday morning, afternoon, is going to be this area right over and through here for the risk of some stronger storms. We'll get snow pulling through the UP and some colder air coming in on this high pressure. Then after that, as we talked about last week, there was this time period in the midsection of the country all the way to the west where things are just kind of calm midweek. It's cooler, but it's calm. We just don't see a big organized system coming through until we get toward the end of the week. Now right now that system is locked up. Let's let this reset here. It's locked up here in this wide open jet stream path. As you can see, just coming in like this, multiple short waves coming in. And they're all coming into the northwest and they're going to eject. But I've got some important news about where these things are going in the near term. And it starts with a look at this figure. This is from the 12Z European model today. So can you see how they're coming in? And most of them are really targeting the Canadian Prairie, the Northern Plains, and then storms to the south. What I'm going to be watching most carefully is how far back to the west are we able to bring that moisture? And then what does it do to shut down windows to the east and also into the north? Those are some big questions we've got. Plus, as we've been discussing, the very late arrival of spring in the northwest. We need to talk about temperatures there as well. So let's do this. Right now, the most important thing I'm watching with this next wave coming in at the end of the week, it's right here, is this. That wave on Friday, this is Friday morning, Friday afternoon. Now this is different. You remember the previous wave? It dug into California and ejected like that. This one's digging through Utah and Colorado and ejecting here. Now, I know to an untrained eye, you'd be like, well, what does that matter? What this matters is, instead of putting the best lift north here, it now puts it there. And there's good agreement. The GFS also has this trough digging at that time. Now, what's important to know about these two models is lately they've been doing about the same, but as of the last couple of days, the Europeans taken over as the better model. But they still are in pretty good agreement overall. I'd like to show you that. So here's this afternoon's model runs here on Monday. Okay, we've already seen system number 1 clear. And remember, we talked about the storms on Tuesday night here. But as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, it's just being patient to see the next system come through. So overnight Wednesday into Thursday morning, yeah, we could be watching for some showers and storms right into this part of Missouri, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Arkansas. It's in both models. But the next big event is happening here on Friday morning, Friday midday, and Friday evening. See the next system taking shape? Now, as is usual, the GFS is going to be faster than the European. But I left it here on purpose because the low is coming out here. And that's farther to the south. Remember I told you the wave was doing this? So if it's coming out farther to the south, that's a better chance at bringing moisture back to parts of Nebraska and parts of South Dakota. And that system comes out and then turns north. See it there? This is now looking out Friday into Saturday. The only difference is the GFS is farther along with the system, putting it in Iowa, whereas the European's just back here in South Dakota. Could be more snow on the backside because I do not yet have a good handle on it. I'm not going to show you snowfall mounts. But it drags another front this weekend through the central and eastern Corn Belt. We'll probably see some more heavy rain into this corridor, and the system moves through. Now after that, we once again get a lingering boundary here, high pressure off the coast, and we just feed it. So we're going to keep this part of the mid-south of the Ohio Valley once again wet into early next week. And the next system comes crashing in. So see, that one comes in and it's going to form at some point. We don't have the details on it yet, but it'll be midweek next week on the 4th. There's something here. That's where the GFS has it. The European's a little farther north. The point is they both have something. Now, when I compare just the next week, all right, both models, European's much wetter on the backside. GFS being quicker is wetter here. Remember, these colors, GFS is wetter. These European is wetter. The European is wetter also down here from the mid-south at the lower Mississippi River Valley. Okay, just a couple of model differences. Week 2, let's start out right now on day 10, May 5th. The jet stream's still screaming. You have a low north of higher pressure. So between the two, the flow's coming in like this. So it stays open and moving. We dig more troughs into the west in that first week. There's still a lingering trough over the east, hence the colder weather. and we get set up like this. Now, a lot of us that like to storm chase would look out here and say May 10th, trough in the Four Corners. That's going to be the potential for more storms in this area. And they're right, and the models are picking up on it. See it? This is now the week 2 precipitation anomalies showing that next system coming in, digging. Big question we'll have is, does it dig and cut through Wyoming, or does it dig and cut through New Mexico? I want New Mexico. That opens up more of this area to moisture and more drought relief. But what I want is different from what could possibly happen, and we're too far out to really give you the details on that. So now that we've now seen the long range, we've looked at the short range on precip, let's turn our attention over to temperatures. Because as of this evening, we had a large area here of freeze warnings, frost advisories, and there was a red flag warning on the backside. What you got going on here is flooding around the Red River of the North. Over the next 7 days, everywhere in gray is expected to see a frost. And yes, that would be late in this area, late in this region as well. We're well past our climatological average on frost. When we look at those high temperatures compared to normal, we've already had this today on Monday. On Tuesday, the cold air continues to spread east, while warmth replaces it in the plains. Now, when you see these kind of temperatures coming back into the plains, we know that that's going to increase evaporation rates and cause problems in this area with making the drought worse. But remember, we're waiting later in the week. So on Thursday and Friday, while much of this part of the country stays cooler than average, this is now the warm sector, 90s in this area, opening up for the next system that comes through on Saturday into Sunday. So we tend to split the country north-south. Looking out there beyond that time period, day 5 through 10, again, see the split? When you look out here, day 10 through 15, this is the trough exiting, but we're now seeing the models becoming less aggressive on the extent of that cold. Now that means if windows do open up, the temperatures are starting to behave. And the risk of a late season frost, especially in the eastern Corn Belt, is beginning to diminish. That's what I'm thinking about. Even the new ECMWF weeklies, from May 7th to May 14th are now less aggressive on how cold this was going to be, but certainly the same on the intensity of the heat. Why is the Pacific Northwest showing up cold? Because that jet stream's still coming in something like that. All right. I think windows are opening, but they're just tight at this point. That's what our long-range forecast is looking like as we go through the month of May. Let's now give our attention quickly to South America. Remember this map from a few weeks ago? We like to look at where we're looking at that Safrinha corn crop and where it's mostly grown. You can see it. Now, Grace just released some new data here showing us through April 18th on where their root zone soil moisture maps are indicating drought developing. Western Argentina, big section here around Goiás, parts of Mato Grosso do Sul, getting up into eastern, like Tocantins, eastern Mato Grosso. There's been a large area that's been showing up dry. And why we're so concerned about that is because over the next 5 days, we're going to be starting to see some warmth come in. And the forecast continues to put a big donut hole right in through here, where precipitation totals are expected to be generally less than 5 to 10 millimeters, in some place no rain. So what this might do is really just peel back the top end of this crop and cause some stress. I have yet to really get some boots on the ground information about what the drought stress has been like there, but we need to keep an eye on this because it means that Safrinha corn crop is not finishing under the most ideal conditions, and we're still talking about grain fill right now. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I appreciate all your attention today, and we'll give you another update on Thursday. Thanks.